Hi, this is Mark Evanier. I wrote for Scooby-Doo on the comic books and on the TV show, and you're listening to a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
The gang's all here, they're on the case, and there's no ghost that they wouldn't face, 'cause they dig it, Scooby-Doo. Yeah, they dig it, Scooby-Doo.
Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of a podcast named Scooby-Doo, the show that attempts to unravel 50 years of mysteries, meddling kids, and masked villains. My name is Mike Josick, and I'll be your guide through all things ghostly and groovy as I investigate every angle of every mystery and beyond. So grab yourself some Scooby snacks, fire up the mystery machine, and let's start the show.
Here's the cemetery where the curse in these woods began.
Like, that's really fascinating. Why can't we go now?
What do you mean? We're gonna camp here. How else can we learn about the curse?
Camp here? By a cemetery? Like I didn't sign on for this.
Welcome to episode 30 of a podcast named Scooby-Doo and the first full interview format episode of the new year. If you're a regular listener, you'll know that the last episode was a reaction analysis critique of the Scoob, the number one Scoob trailer that came out a little while ago, and fellow podcasters Nick Robes and Billy Seguire from What's With You Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doos or Scooby-Don'ts, they joined me on the show to talk about that trailer, things we saw, things we expect. If you haven't checked that out, I'd encourage you to go and do so. There actually has been a second trailer released, which it doesn't have a lot of new material, but it's something that I've been talking to the other gentlemen about possibly getting together to do another reaction episode. If this is something that you guys really don't want to see, maybe send those venomous diatribes via Twitter or Facebook. But we'll see if that actually happens. And until then, I am thrilled to be getting back to the interview format show. It's kind of the bread and butter of the podcast. It's the whole reason I exist. And equally thrilled to be doing this show where I'm talking to two really interesting gentlemen, Casper Kelly and Larry Morris, who were both instrumental in the creation and execution of the Scooby-Doo Project, which came out in 1999. They were originally bumpers and interstitials for a Scooby-Doo marathon over at Cartoon Network, and the Scooby-Doo Project in and of itself has become somewhat legendary in its own right. Coming out in 99, obviously 2019 marked its 20-year anniversary, much like it marked Scooby-Doo's 50th anniversary in general. This conversation did originally take place back in November of last year. Its origins actually date much earlier than that. I'd spoken to Casper at length about Scooby-Doo Project and also Night of the Living Do, which is another project that Casper had worked on. But for some reason, there was a technical foobar and half of that conversation did not get recorded. So we wrangled back and forth, exchanged emails trying to schedule a second conversation to basically do a redo. And in that process, Casper suggested bringing Larry on. He said, "Do you want me to contact Larry and see if he wants to come on the show?" And I was like, oh, hell yeah, like more the merrier. So in a way, a disaster led to an even more fortuitous event as we now have Casper and Larry talking about this project. And one thing I love, and again, my whole purpose for existing here, is to get as many perspectives and bits of oral history on this franchise as possible. So it's really great. Larry remembers stuff that Casper doesn't. Casper remembers stuff that Larry doesn't. And there's just a lot of cool conversation about this thing, which I think most people in the fandom genuinely appreciate and love. I think it's something that's almost borderline headcanon for people. It's kind of unofficial canon. And let's face it, it is the one Blair Witch parody that both Dan Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez fully love and approve of. One quick note before we get into the conversation. Larry refers to Casper as Chris quite frequently. And basically, Casper's real name is Chris, and Casper is a professional name that he tends to go by. I think he might even say in the conversation that there's so many Chris Kellys in the industry that he decided to go with Casper as his professional name. It kind of weebles and wobbles back and forth. I think Larry does correct himself at some point. It might be in part 2. This interview will be split into 2 parts, much like all the other interviews that I do. So just to bypass any confusion, if you hear Chris or Casper, it is referring to the same human being. And lastly, there's going to be some cool bonus stuff that will accompany these 2 halves of the conversation, these 2 episodes of the podcast. I will get into a little bit more detail in the outro so that you can get to the conversation as quickly as possible. So stick around after the chat to get a few more details in that regard. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy my exclusive conversation with Scooby-Doo Project creators, directors, producers, writers, Casper Kelly, and Larry Morris. We'll see you on the other side.
Like, why do we have to always do these things when it's almost dark?
So we are here talking to Casper Kelly and Larry Morris, the co-writers and co-directors of the Scooby-Doo Project. Not officially Scooby-Doo canon, but a much beloved piece of expanded universe, which I'm pretty sure people just accept as canon anyways. How are you guys doing?
We're great. Great to talk with you.
Yeah, doing well.
Something that listeners might not know, and in order for me to say this the way I want to say it, I have to mention that Casper and I had a conversation several months ago that technology sent off into the ether, and so this is kind of a redo for me and Casper. But Larry is new to the conversation, which is fantastic. But one of the things that Casper and I had talked about was that not only is this the 50th anniversary of Scooby-Doo in general, but it is the 20th anniversary of the Scooby-Doo Project, which, considering how much people still seek this out and talk about it, I mean, the fact that we're sitting here alone is testament to that. I think the 20-year mark should be acknowledged and celebrated here, so congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yes.
You know what's gratifying is that I remember after we did it and it aired, I went over to the ratings people and said, "How did it do?" And they're like, "Oh, not well." Kids were scared. They didn't. So I'm glad some kids hung in there. And now we're doing a podcast interview with them.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to reflect 20 years later in that respect, because it was just a bunch of bumps, just a bunch of filler around the commercial breaks that we did stitch together into a longer piece, obviously. But the wormhole of YouTube and finding all these people who are seeking out every last bump that was made that wasn't part of the longer pieces, that's really surreal to me.
Is that happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. So basically, a little backstory is we would have marathons, like a Scooby-Doo marathon, which is basically we're going to show 8 hours of Scooby-Doo episodes or whatever. And then that's called a stunt, I guess, right?
That's right.
And so rather than just the bumps, let me back up. This is probably boring. But I think there's a rule in American broadcast for kids programming that if you have a cartoon, you have to have what's called a bump to transition to commercials. Like, hey, you're watching Scooby-Doo, stay tuned, more Scooby-Doo coming up. And then when you come back, now back to Scooby-Doo. That's to help kids realize, oh, we're moving into commercials, so that they wouldn't be fooled into thinking a commercial was content. They would go, oh, the content is I don't understand.
It's a legal buffer.
Yeah, it's a legal buffer.
Today it's a legal buffer so that you're not, quote unquote, host selling to children.
Yeah. So that buffer provided us this opportunity for creativity. So anyway, we would have these stunts of like 8 hours of Scooby-Doo, which would mean we would do new special bumps. So we would try to think of a theme for this stunt. And in this particular instance, the Blair Witch Project had just come out. I don't know if we'd seen it.
No, we had not seen it.
Because it hadn't come out, but it was buzz.
Well, when did you guys start working on the project? Because I think Blair Witch came out in the summer of that year?
That's right. It came out in July or August.
Yeah.
And it was a big hit at Sundance. So obviously we were into independent movies, and we were into movies in general, and then it was getting buzz for being a very scary movie. and it was about kids getting lost in the woods, or teenagers making a documentary, or 20-somethings, and it just was ripe. It was just like, that's perfect. We got to make that work. And that's what I'm hazy on. I don't remember pitching the idea. I just remember just making it, just going forth and making it with no red lights at all. It was just go. And the next thing you know, we were right in the middle of making the Scooby-Doo Project before Blair Witch had hit theaters.
I mean, we knew that we had seen the trailer, which was very exciting, and handheld VHS. We can do that. And I don't know if we knew if the technology was there to comp animated characters into incredibly shaky. we had what was his name? Who was the guy on the flame or whatever? It was
there was a composer named Butch Seifert.
Yeah, yes.
And
who would spend 8 hours a day just painstakingly comping frame by frame, like Scooby-Doo or what have you, in a shaky woods shot.
It was truly we're going to figure this out in post, is what they say, and so that's truly what we did. We figured out what the movie was about after we saw the movie, and so we were able to do a parody of the film at that point. So writing for this thing started, but it really kicked in once the movie came out. I remember we all went to see the film together, at least most of us did, and we started writing like the next week, just script after script after script. And in those days, there was a lot of time to fill on cable channels, especially kids' cable channels. And so that's why we had to make so much content, was to fill all these Scooby-Doo marathons that were scheduled for the end of October. So our deadline was set, and we knew that we had to hit that deadline. And we'd all done Scooby marathons for the network, and we knew how much work we had to make in order to fill the time. And of course, we were ambitious, so we wrote a mini movie.
Yeah, I think, and this time we wanted it to be able to be edited together to form something.
That's right.
To form a short.
Yeah.
That was kind of my next question. I was going to say, since it was compiled and played at the end of the marathon as a single piece, did you guys view it as segments, or do you view it as a short, as a complete film of its own?
I view it as the longest 3 months of my life. No, actually, I think when you're in it, you think about the compartmentalized version. You don't really think about the long version. It was working itself towards the long version, and we knew that we had enough to make the long version. As reflecting on it, I think of it as the whole project. And the long version is the long version, but there's obviously some things that didn't make the cut. I think Scrappy's not in the long version.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you seen that, the one with Scrappy-Doo in it?
Yes. Where he shows up and he's like, "Hey guys."
Yeah.
And they're like,
I wrote those. That's what I'm hazy on, is like who wrote what, but I definitely wrote the Scrappy stuff because I had the marathon that had Scrappy in it, so I had to work him in.
Okay.
For those bumps, and that's how that came about,
And I think Steve did the first one. Steve Patrick, the third person working on this, and he did the promo of Daphne just running like hell, and then. No,
actually, I did that.
Oh, you did that? Oh, shit.
I wrote the Daphne, because in the trailer for Blair Witch, that's, there's that chase sequence, and so basically I wrote that, and we had to shoot that and prove that we could make this.
Oh, you mean relax? It's just Scrappy-Doo?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love that.
We had to prove that this would work as we were making it. So we took that footage, and then we shot a flashlight, and Steve wrote the "We shouldn't have meddled."
Oh, okay.
With Velma, and I don't remember which was done first or completed first, but as soon as we saw that running footage, which was basically just a run cycle of Daphne, that we just flopped, and it worked. And then the humor of the parody of Velma saying "we shouldn't have meddled," it was just all systems go. Everybody loved the idea.
It was pretty fabulous, yeah. Now that we've kind of teased everybody with a little bit of Scooby-Doo Project talk, I do want to hop in the old time machine. I'm curious, I ask everybody on the show what their first point of contact with Scooby-Doo was, what was kind of the flashpoint in their life for the character. Some people, of course, come to it as work, and some people, like myself and so many others, are Saturday morning serial eaters watching it on the tube. Was that your guys' experience?
Yeah, definitely for me.
Yeah, I'm 47, so I was probably watching the original Scooby-Doo at some point. But my earliest memory of it was Scrappy-Doo, because by the time I was 7 or 8 years old is when that was hitting the air. So
we were probably watching at the same time because I'm 46.
Yeah. I remember watching the original one, and I loved it. I loved Shaggy and Scooby's the chemistry of it just works really well. Shaggy and Scooby's relationship, and I remember sometimes the musical sequences would be too long. I didn't necessarily like it when the music kicked in. I didn't like musicals as a kid either. I was like, oh no, they're singing. But yeah.
I never liked when they unmasked and it was a human. I always wanted it to be
the monster.
A monster, especially the 10,000 volt ghost. Is that the right name of the first?
Oh, he looks so cool.
Yeah, he was awesome. The character design was just so great. And I'm very visual, so I was drawn to that. I'm sure.
I was fascinated for myself up until, honestly, more recently than I want to admit to. The whole who is it going to be at the end has always been a mystery to me, and often is even when I'm rewatching. And I think there's some device in my head that as soon as the episode is over, it wipes that so that I can enjoy it again if I ever revisit. And people say well, it's the first person you meet because there aren't that many secondary cast members, right? So essentially, the first person that has a speaking role is the villain, but for some reason, my brain just turns that part of the logic system in my head off, and it allows me to kind of enjoy the show.
Usually because it's just some old man or woman. Actually, it's always an old man in the original series, it seems like, right?
With some real estate plot.
Right.
So, obviously, animation lovers as children, you got into animation as a career. Has this always been a road that you've been on, or was animation something you fell into?
I guess it's a road I've been on. I've always been into I guess it's more writing, but I did a cartoon strip, I wrote short stories, I had a cartoon strip in college, and then that led into writing promos and then writing animation, and now I write more live action. But now, currently, I'm back on an animated show for Marvel. So yeah, but even as a little kid, my parents would read picture books to me, and then I would try to make my own picture books. But I didn't even know what letters were, so I just did a bunch of random markings at the bottom. I knew that was something you're supposed to have. Yeah, I just loved making stuff. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, it's more the same. I'm less of a writer. I learned how to write at Cartoon Network, is what I tell everybody.
Larry's got an amazing design sense. Would you say?
Yeah. I'm not an art director.
And a director?
Yeah, I'm not an art director, but I can direct animation. I can also do live action direction. I think the thing about working at Cartoon was it made us well rounded. It let us explore different things, and so I'm very similar to Chris. I was a radio, TV, film major in college, but at an early age I was making Super 8 movies and stop motion films on Super 8 with Star Wars and action figures and that kind of thing. And then that kind of just led to making more and more videos in the 80s, and then led to me working in post-production. So I kind of come from editing and post-production, but then I learned how to write at Cartoon, and I'm not a good writer, but
I disagree with that. But it's true. At Cartoon Network, we did become well-rounded because we weren't overly segmented. We were allowed to do we were just given a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
It was really great.
So you were doing you were doing
ahead.
other things, and just positions opened up at Cartoon Network that were along your line, and
I wouldn't say that. I would say we had a job. I think even now when I work for a network, not cable network, but an NBC type of thing, there's 30 people on the email, and they all have very narrow job functions. Like a person that just directs the voice talent. That's all they do. Another person that just directs the animation. And we were doing all of that as part of our job. We directed the voices. Mm-hmm. We had a producer, a wonderful producer, who just helped make the context and make the trains run on time. But all of the creative we got to do.
It was structured and it still is structured at Cartoon Network today, which is rare, like a internal agency. So it's like an ad agency because Michael Alleen came from J. Walter Thompson. He came from an ad agency and set it up the same way. So producers would handle the money, they would handle the bookings and talent and all that, and then the creatives would write, do post-production, producing, and everything from stop motion animation with clay to live action direction.
Now I have a question for you, Larry, about
Yeah.
it. Is like when we the various actors we got, like one of them was my mom, one of them was a friend.
Yes.
But like I don't think we did casting, or like the older woman, the scary old. How did we find her? Was that a casting?
We used a casting agency.
Okay, we did. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's basically what we did. We basically utilized Ashley Kohler was our producer on the Scooby-Doo Project, and she would set all that up for us. We would just say, we'd break down the script and say, oh, we need an old woman with bad teeth, or we need a montage of people talking about creatures. And to save money, we just call friends up.
Yeah, as well. Yeah.
I think literally, I think we went to Slopes Barbecue in Alpharetta, Georgia, and my friend was the owner. And we said, "Hey, you want to be in this thing?" As we ate dinner on our way to go shoot at night, overnight. Some scenes for Scooby-Doo.
Yes, he's in there.
Yeah.
I think I had originally phrased my question poorly. What I was basically saying was that you didn't go into things being like, I'm going to work in animation and this is going to be like what I'm doing. You were doing other things. You had other applicable skills, and that just is what brought you into Cartoon Network. And then,
well, mine's a little easier to answer in that it might be the same way. But basically, I wanted to make movies. I wanted to make independent films, and so my professor in college told me, if you want to do that, learn how to edit. So I was in post production. I was an edit assist on commercials. So I would work overnights loading footage into Avid digital systems for editing. And that's where clients would come in, and I'd met people from Cartoon Network. And then I was like, wait a minute. I don't have to work nights, and I get to write copy for TV about cartoons. Okay, great. I'll take that job. And I basically took the lowest job I could at Cartoon Network to get in the door. Steve Patrick, actually, the third person who wrote on this project, he was I don't know what he was doing. He was maybe out of college working somewhere. I think he worked at some crazy job in Ohio, and ended up moving to Atlanta and getting a job as a tour guide.
CNN. At
CNN. So a CNN tour guide just to be in the same town with Cartoon Network so he could get a job at Cartoon.
Wow.
I think for me, I just wanted to tell stories as my day job, and I love animation and live action. I know them both well. I love them. So when this opportunity arose, and when I got the job at Cartoon Network, they probably did it for you too.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a job interview. The first phase was they gave you a writer's test, where it would be like, write a Scooby-Doo promo, write a this, and that was so fun.
Yeah.
And no one else does that I know of, and that was awesome.
I was creative director at Cartoon, that department. I ended up working my way up to creative director in that department, and we had that test for years. Later, we kept that instilled. I think they still might have that test. Yeah.
Yeah.
But animation was something. I loved Popeye. I loved the Fleischer Popeyes. I loved Fleischer brothers, Superman. So that really, once I got in cartoon, and we were doing 50 greatest cartoons at that time. It was the first time they had done that, where they just went through a countdown. And that was my first project, and I was able to watch all these cartoons that I loved growing up and in art school or film school. So I knew that once I got that job, it was like, right now I'm looking for work in animation, so I'm like, yeah, I want to get back into it.
I very much get the feeling from, like I said earlier, I didn't really have access to the Cartoon Network stuff directly from Cartoon Network. It was all on Canadian channels. But so the bumpers and all that kind of really cool stuff we didn't get. But just kind of going back and talking to other people who were working at that time, I just very much get the feeling that it was a really open, sort of creative place to be. It reminds me a little bit of stories that I hear from like Termite Terrace, where they were just sort of left alone to do their thing. And Casper, I think you said something, I can't remember if it was on air or off air, that was kind of similar to that.
Well, I think Michael O'Lean, who ran that department, had read Chuck-a-Muck, And have you read that book?
Oh, yes, I own a copy.
Oh, yeah. So a big part of that is the yes meeting. There's a lot of theories about creativity in there that are great. And one of them was the yes meeting, and I do think Michael was heavily influenced by that.
Yeah, he kind of plussed it with the yes and, so like the improv thing came into play at some point. You know,
he even hired an improv group to teach us improv. That was a thing we did.
So you could plus ideas and plus the creative and plus the comedy.
Yes,
it always had to be funny. It always had that was the pressure. It couldn't just be cool. It had to be funny and not even relevant. It was just like just make it funny.
And then we would have a writers meeting where we'd have to read your ideas.
Yeah.
And it was great though. It was very supportive and it was so wonderful to make people laugh.
Yeah. That group actually created what became Adult Swim, the packaging. So all the early black and white old people swimming, synchronized swimming, all the ideation around Adult Swim, the naming of it, everything came out of that group as well later. So that's the kind of bubble, creative bubble that was going on at that time.
So in the middle of all this, obviously bumpers and stuff had been previously made, but now you've got this marathon coming up. How was the idea of the Scooby-Doo Project originated? I think, Larry, you said that you guys didn't have to pitch it. Did it come from above, or was it still something that came from you guys?
I think there was, obviously, having worked there for only a few years and everyone having to do their time on marathons, not just Scooby marathons, but filling that much time, there was a certain requirement of how much work that you had to make. And so along with that came an urgency. So you were under the gun to come up with an idea to, again, like we said before, package these marathons. And so as soon as I think we realized, once we saw the trailer for Blair Witch, I think as soon as we realized that together, I'm pretty sure it was you and I that realized this, and then Steve kind of plussed it and said, yeah, we should do that. We took it to Oline, and I think Oline just said yes. Yes. And as soon as you got a yes from him, then it was like a kid in the candy store. We had a digital camera, we had a mini DV cam, and I grew up in the woods that we are featured in that, all those wood sequences for the most part, like 75, 80% of the thing that's shot at night is my parents' old home up in Alpharetta. So I already knew we had a free location, and I went out and started making the little stick dog.
Yes, you did.
So do
you still have any of those?
I don't. I wish I did. I don't. They were very flimsy. I mean, they were literally, and I kid you not, this was like a one-man crew situation. I think it was me going out the first time and just shooting a bunch of stuff with a light attached to the top of this DV cam. And on that same trip, I think I made those dogs and hung them from a couple trees. And I came back with that footage, and I think that's what we did as a test. And I think the next time we went out, we had more of an idea what we were going to do, is what my memory serves. So at that point, we had to prove that it would work. And once we did that with a little bit of time compositing, then they gave us the full green light at that point. For to have the money, basically. Yeah. They released the money so we could actually, go make this thing.
Did you shoot it?
Oh, we both did.
Okay.
So Chris and I shot a majority of the pieces that were not shot in Canada. So
that's another part of the piece.
Yes. Yeah. So basically what happened was after that first trip out, that first shoot, quote unquote shoot, with me in the woods, Chris and I went out with pre-recorded scripts. So we'd have some of the characters' dialogues recorded, and then we'd have scratch VO that was performed by one of us that were pre-builds, and we would just block where we wanted this action to happen in the woods, and we would shoot that with us, just the both of us. And that's kind of where we started, and we got better at it as we went along, and timing out the pans of the camera to where people should be. And what we did was, based upon our initial test, we used rudimentary tracking points that were on sticks. So we had basically white dots on black cardboard, pieces that were affixed to these sticks, and that would be where the characters would be, locked. We couldn't have a lot of motion with the characters walking or moving because it would be too much work. So that's why there's a lot of characters that are standing there or just sitting still in a lot of that stuff, and the camera did a lot of the motion. And so we kind of lucked out in that regard because Blair Witch was so shaky that it worked to parody Blair Witch, but then it helped our animation cycle. So a lot of the animation is just lip flap and arms moving and that kind of thing.
And I think the location where they're all running, that hallway with all those doors,
yes,
that's your friend's house.
That's right. So as we got deeper in this thing, we needed other locations to fill it out. And so I lived in this house over in Smyrna, and we had to do that classic Scooby hallway door scene. And that location just worked. My friend was still living there, and it also had this amazing creepy cellar that I actually had to hide in that cellar during a hurricane that never stopped. It came right through town in 2005. I'm sorry, in 1995. And that creepy cellar was so perfect. I was like, wow, we got so lucky that
and there was a cemetery there.
And there was a cemetery
in the yard there.
It was a house from the Civil War that basically was used as a Civil War hospital for some battles, and so people who died there and members of the family were buried in the cemetery. So you couldn't. I mean, it was just a gold mine, And
then the Canada component, which we mentioned, was you want to tell them about that?
So basically, and not to get too technical here on what goes on during that period of time, but we actually had to have a lot of discussions about live action people versus animated characters and how to handle that. Because there's a lot of stuff where we just couldn't animate new characters because we'd had to do new character design. So, and plus the movie was interviewing people, about Ghost or about the Witch, excuse me. So we just said, all right, we're going to interview live action people, but we had to have the Mystery Machine. So we were like, should we do an animated Mystery Machine when that was just a technical nightmare? And so Ashley had put a phone call into Warner Brothers PR or marketing, and learned that there were 2 Astrovans or GMC vans that were used for marketing purposes. They probably still have a fleet of these things. And they travel around to promote Scooby. Well, of all the times we needed it, it was parked in Toronto. And so we had to get on a plane and fly up to Toronto to shoot with the Mystery Machine. So the opening sequences of the Scooby-Doo Project, or anything inside the van, is shot on a highway north of Toronto. And a little funny story about that, you were talking about that you didn't have, Cartoon Network or, you only had Teletoon. I remember we pulled into the Walmart, I think it was like a Walmart equivalent, and we were so, excited because we're driving the Mystery Machine, and then people are going to be looking at us and pointing, and kids are going to come out running out and, be excited. And not one person looked our way, and we couldn't understand why. We're like, why do people not know Scooby? What's going on in Canada?
That was a dark time for the franchise.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how we ended up in Canada.
You had mentioned going through the process of just proving that it would work. Was the proving more on the technical side and just doing the compositing and getting the animation to blend with the live action, or was it just the whole tone of it to see if you could to actually carry that parody line and blend it with the gang?
Well, I think just like any other like maybe kids programming or especially cartoons, the script process, we had to sell those scripts in to Olean, and so anything that would be too scary or the tone would have been handled there. But as far as proving it goes.
But he gave us a lot of rope because, we still had, the classic thing of Shaggy in the corner.
Yeah.
Just still haunts me.
But he trusted us. We were we were Scooby experts. You did so much Scooby work. He trusted us. So proving that would work, I don't think was the issue. I don't remember having a lot of discussions around that. It was definitely the technical. As a creative director, you just got to be an executive producer as well. You can't let your money, your budget get out of control.
Right.
Some of those projects in cartoon got really expensive, and they were trying to, curb the idea that this thing would really take off and cost a lot of money.
To this day, you mentioned the Shaggy line. I will occasionally be known to utter, like I'm scared, man. It was just having seen Blair Witch and then seeing it in the parody and having Shaggy say that was such a golden moment.
I do remember it caused a problem because we couldn't end it there. We couldn't end.
Just drop the camera.
We dropped the camera. We did in the long version, I believe, But in the bump version, we actually have an unmasking. So,
that's right.
So we hired an actor.
Yeah.
And then we composited the creature's face on him, and we unmasked him so that kids wouldn't be scared.
Oh yes.
So we just declined to put that into the.
But then there's still a monster because there's the monster in the window.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's so interesting. Like there's so many different versions online where people have taken things from the ads to the bumpers themselves, and they patch them together into like all of these fan edits. Some of them are like total uncut director's version, and others are sort of the short versions that pretty much end after the Like I'm Scared Man. They don't actually include the live action unmasking. What is the actual official director's cut for this movie?
The official director's cut would be the one that is around 18 minutes long, that Steve, Chris, and myself put together over at a post-production place outside of Turner one night. We were towards the end of the project, and we put it together.
Did that even ever air?
That's what aired.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what aired at the end.
Okay.
And
then they did an 11-minute version to air on Adult Swim. Is that the deal?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And from what I remember, what got cut from that long version was all the Scrappy-Doo material. I mean, he might be in there barely, but it's not. There's no reveal of Scrappy. And then the unmasking, I believe, got cut from that version. And then there was a movie marathon. We were forced to basically wrap this movie marathon, those Scooby movies. So we went up to Ellijay, Georgia, to a drive-in movie theater, and we just turned all the lights off and kind of made it look haunted.
Oh, that's cool.
And Steve wrote those bumps, and so they basically we had to work that in somehow. So those things didn't make the cut. I don't know if anybody's actually tracked those down and put them on YouTube, but
I don't know if I don't remember those.
But yeah,
I'd love to see those.
The 18-minute version is the official version, and that does not include the wonderful, amazing press conference that we created for the promo. I think that Chris wrote with an actor playing a sheriff, and Jay Bastian playing from Cartoon Network and now of Warner Brothers, playing the sheriff's deputy.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He's a sheriff's deputy as they're laying all the videotapes out that they found in the duffel bag in the woods that they're going to show as part of the marathon.
There is a version online that has that edited in as part of part of the narrative. Yeah. But initially that was like an advertisement, was it not?
Yes.
That was just an ad. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're asking questions about evidence, and they're like, "You will see it during the marathon. We will air it or whatever." Yeah.
That's right. That guy was great. That actor.
The whole thing is just so tonally on point. Like, I wondered, you guys obviously had a lot of freedom. We talked about that before. But as far as with that freedom, like, how hard was it to ride that parody line? Because it so honors, like, the original kind of idea of Scooby-Doo. There's nothing about it that doesn't feel Scooby-Doo, which is probably why fans have kind of embraced it as this kind of expanded, canon. But it's also perfect parody, and it's kind of irreverent. I mean, it's just such a great balance, and I just wondered, like, how difficult that was to ride that line.
Well, it was a huge labor of love. I mean, we worked so hard on it. I mean, we spent so many hours on edit and post on that thing.
Yeah.
And, I mean, just things like when Freddy is freaked out and he's just rocking back and forth, and he's using his ascot as a do-rag, I think.
Yeah.
They originally didn't animate it at all like that. I think it was originally he was just sitting and he still had the ascot, and we were like, I was like, no, please, he's got to be he's got to look really genuinely scared, and yeah.
I think if you tried to make this today, it wouldn't happen. It goes without saying. Just there's too many layers, and that's the thing. There were no. I think it's a twofold answer for you. Basically, there were no layers. The buck stopped at Michael Oline.
One approval.
We didn't have to run it through Warner Brothers. I think if they saw what we were doing with their characters, they would have just said absolutely not.
Even at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, remember, this is just. Late 90s, early 2000s, basically. I guess
Zombie Island had already happened, so the franchise was kind of being built up again.
Yeah, absolutely. But this was when you made bumps, it was under everybody's radar. They just thought, oh, they're just making TV promos, or they're just making bumps. It wasn't content. So to schedule it as content, and also to hop back for a second, the reason that 18-minute long version is the official version is because we only had 20 minutes of airtime to work with. That's all they gave us. So that's what you're up against. So we really snuck that on the air. There was no ad for that long form version. It just happened to run at the tail end. So there was a lot of that kind of, the logistics of moving things around on the air to make it play.
Yeah, I love how, I said that it honors the characters. As the characters are breaking down, as Casper was saying a few seconds ago about, Fred rocking on the tree, like everybody kind of breaks down, as they do in the Blair Witch. Daphne snippet Velma about maybe she could try to be a little more feminine. Like
that was actually... It's funny because I went back to... we were talking about this before we began recording, but I've kept all of my production tapes over the years, and for whatever reason, I have every Scooby-Doo mini DV tape.
Holy cow.
And I was going back through and making a little short documentary about the making of, in honor of this 20th anniversary. It's on the Vimeo. And that original script was way, way, way harsher than what ended up in the cut.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. There's a couple extra lines here and there that we shouldn't let see the light of day. The coda to that is basically, I think what we did was we left everybody, and it goes without saying, we left every Scooby character in character, but put them through the filter of Blair Witch. So Daphne freaking out when there's a creature outside the tent, what would she naturally do? You guys go out there for a Scooby snack, 2 Scooby snacks, and then Fred's like, you guys go out there and dress up like doctors. Where are we going to find a gurney in the middle of the woods? Like when you listen to that, I'm taken back to what we did, was basically just the tropes of Scooby placed through that veneer, and it's so simple, but it worked. It really is that. It's a testament to being Scooby experts, and having to write for them, but also, having great source material to parody.
And Shaggy eating the map. Like, for me, that was the perfect blending of these two properties. It's like, of course Shaggy's going to eat the map as he's losing his mind, and of course you have to find a way. Honestly, that's a more believable reason for the map disappearing than Heather throwing it, or what's his name throwing it in the river.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And it was fun to work with the voice talent. They were really game for this. I remember them all enjoying the material.
That's right.
That was...
It's a Scooby, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know he's done like so much since then, but I honestly think that Shaggy is Scott Innes's best Shaggy that he's ever done. It was the closest, I think, to kind of what Casey does with it. I don't know if that was in the writing or in the perforance, but you guys probably you were the voice directors for that as well, weren't you?
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we did direct them.
Yeah. We were not. I definitely don't remember doing like one takes. We definitely did a lot of takes.
Yeah. We worked them hard because we didn't know any better. We worked them hard.
We were young and we didn't know.
You pulled a Shatner
on
him?
I will say, I remember this. Do you remember this, Larry? I remember you telling me that I had pushed how much Scooby talked than he would have in the cartoon.
That's right.
He does. Yeah, he does. But honestly, now he talks so much more. So
exactly, like we were basing it upon the classic Scooby. So Scooby would be like, well,
that's a pretty good Scooby, Larry.
Well, so yeah, I've had to do Scooby a couple times, here and there over the years, just to fill in. But Chris would write things like, "I'm not going out there." No. He was just this whole dialogue.
Yeah.
I was, the thing about it is, I'd love to dig up the original scripts. We should try to find those.
Yeah.
But there's some good stuff. There's some good nuggets there. Little Easter eggs. But I think what it finally became and what it ended up gelling as an edit, as the animation and as the scripts. All that stuff. It was pretty close to perfect, or perfect for what it needed to be and achieve. It's hard to think about it being more elaborate and more rendered animation, or more fleshed out. It's pretty rough, the way it was put together.
Yeah,
I mean, the animation, not to discredit animation, Primal Screen did the animation.
Yeah, they did a great job.
They did a great job. It's not that.
I think Joe Peary was the director of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It just it could have been overdone if we had
absolutely, yeah.
had a bigger budget. Or
Yes.
Yeah.
It needed to be, yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit more about the animation, but I just wanted to qualify. Every time one of you, particularly Larry, brings up something like scripts or DV tapes, I just get goosebumps. Because I'm like an animation history, like archive rat kind of guy. It's the whole reason I'm doing this podcast. So I hear that and it's like, whoa.
Well, I could send you the DV tapes, or digitize them, and it'll be all it's going to be is like 15 minutes of the same bump over and over again, and just bad camera work. and also, everything was fed into the camera by a cassette tape. So a Walkman cassette tape was fed into the camera, and we had headphones, and we were listening to the tape through the camera
of the dialogue.
Listen to the pre-builds.
And, the dialogue, yeah. We edited the dialogue in advance,
obviously,
so the camera moves could match what we're imagining.
Yeah, so we could block the whole thing out, and the audio is overmodulated. It's like blown out. It's so loud, and I remember having to scrap that plan. So there's footage of Chris with a boombox just walking around with this radio, and the batteries would start running dead, so the dialogues would start getting really slow. But just how insane is that? Two guys in the woods. My neighbors thought we were crazy, by the way, and we're out there with this, radio, playing Scooby-Doo dialogue.
And then it aired
at like 2 a.m.
And then it aired, and like TV Guide was like, "This is a must-watch for this week." Back when TV Guide was a thing.
Right.
And then 20 years later, you're here still talking about it. So there you have it. That brings to a close the first part of my conversation with Scooby-Doo Project creators Casper Kelly and Larry Morris. If you have enjoyed the conversation so far, I will try to get part 2 up soon so you can hear the rest of our great chat. I had a lot of fun with Casper and Larry. Not only were they really generous with their time, but they were also really generous with materials. And I did promise you guys at the beginning of the episode that I was going to give a little bit more information in regards to some fun stuff, some extra content that's going to accompany these 2 episodes. And as most of you know, part of the mandate, on top of making the oral history, I also like to try and produce some added value content. Seeing as how Warner Brothers has been less than stellar with some of their home video releases and coming up with some really cool bonus features, I have enlisted various creators from the franchise to come on and do commentaries, or with the DC Hanna-Barbera folks, they've contributed penciled pages, script pages, process stuff, just giving you guys kind of a behind-the-scenes peek at various iterations of this franchise. And Casper and Larry were eager to jump into the fray. They not only recorded an original brand new commentary for the Scooby-Doo Project, which will be going up soon, but in his anticipation for doing the interview, Larry actually put together a 7-minute documentary on the creation of the Scooby-Doo Project, which he has given me the blessing to share. He has also given me access to an in-house commentary that was recorded back in, I believe, 99, or at least in that kind of 99-2000 sort of period, where I guess, it was still really fresh in their minds. There's probably some stuff in the commentary that they don't cover in their new commentary. There's going to be 2 commentaries, one original in-house commentary from 1999 and one brand new commentary recorded 20 years later in November of 2019. So that's kind of amazing. Plus the documentary. And because that wasn't enough, Larry has also posted to his Vimeo page the best quality version of the Scooby-Doo Project that you will find online. That in-house commentary that I was talking about, they had these in-house DVDs where they would have material that these bumpers and interstitials that they had put together. They collected them on these DVDs, and the people responsible for them did commentaries for them. So Larry has gone and taken the original video from the DVD, which I guess would have been a resolution of like 720i. He has upscaled it to a high definition resolution. Not sure if it's 720p or 1080p, but he has uploaded that to his Vimeo page. So it's the most complete version of the Scooby-Doo project as far as what the creators intended. It is the best quality, and I'm going to link to that in the show notes. It's just really cool that we're putting this stuff out there. There hasn't been that, factory quality version of this out there, and it's such a kind of popular and loved thing that I'm really thrilled that we were able to do this. So like I said, I will link to all of that stuff in the show notes, and be sure to go check those things out and let me know what you think of the interview, of all the bonus stuff that's coming out on any of the social media. Podcast named Scooby-Doo is available on Facebook, at Scooby-Doo on Twitter. Also, there's a podcast named Scooby-Doo on Instagram. There's the show blog at scoobydoocast.wordpress.com, which is also where I tend to post, a lot of the bonus stuff. So that is something worth checking out. And yeah, like I said, let me know what you think of the stuff that has been coming out, and in particular, this Scooby-Doo Project material. If you want to support the show, you've already downloaded and listened, so you've done your part. But if you want to go an extra step, feel free to like, share, subscribe, follow all the social media, wherever you get, stream, download your show. That's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, whatever podcatcher you're using. It's out there. Share on your social media, spread the word, and that's all the shilling that I'm going to do for now. If you want to continue exploring the projects of Casper and Larry, Casper is on Twitter at Hey Casper Kelly, and just follow through the links that I'm going to be posting for Larry's Vimeo page, which is pretty much his presence online. So that's all I have for you. Thank you for sitting through kind of all the little extra stuff in the outro, but thanks so much for listening and supporting the show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did putting it together, and I look forward to getting the rest of it out to you and more fun content down the road. So take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay sane, and remember...
Okay, there's absolutely nothing to panic about.
In the photo of Bones Malone, it showed Jasper looking at the photo of the prima donna. He obviously knew about the legend. I could tell you more, but I don't really wanna. Come on, Velma, you can do it. Entertain us in an informative way. Really? Okay. Then Shaggy in the dressing room with Bones Malone. He found a major clue on his own. It was a high-tech wireless microphone that can alter someone's pitch, frequency, and tone, and that produced the shriek for which the prima donna is well known. Hey, I'm really rhyming a lot. As the manager of Bones Malone, Jasper had complete control. But Bones just... sorry. Can we start at the top of that second? As the manager of Bones Malone, Jasper had complete control. But Bones discovered on his own that Jasper had an evil goal. His greediness took its toll. But there was one thing he never stole. He wanted to control his soul, but he'll never take away his rock and roll. Yeah. His clues are like equations. 1 + 2 is 3. Put 'em all together, and you solve a mystery. Bye.